years now. The M23 in Rwanda has invaded this latest phase going back 3 years. And
Hmm.
and the UN has reported there's been thousands of Rwandan troops, so that's very, that's confirmed, though Rwanda denies it. But so can you tell us a little bit about the how this fits into the history, this last 3 years of Rwandan M23 violence in Eastern Congo, how that fits into a history of Rwandan aggression against its neighbor?
Well, the military gains that Kagame's troops are now making are evoking fears of a wider African war that we saw in the late 1990s, early 2000s. That was a war that embroiled 9 African nations and, many armed groups. But I mean, so essentially, Kagame's henchmen have been waging war in Congo off and on for 3 decades. They've created a succession of militia called the AFDL in 1996, the RCD, the CNDP, the M23, ostensibly to secure political power, extend political power of Kigali in Congo, secure land, and exploit minerals for nearly 3 decades. And the tragedy is that Kagame's gotten away with this. He's the godfather of some of the nastiest warlords in the Great Lakes region of Africa, and he himself has never been charged by the International Criminal Court.
So and when we talk about this in '96, he actually marched his forces backing, with a rebel group at the front. They marched all the way to Kinshasa and they ousted the government. And then when the people they put into office power turned on them or asked them to leave the country, then they reinvaded in 1998, which you referred to this multi-country war, which we're talking about millions and millions of people that were killed over multi, 5 years or exactly how long it went on for. And so you touched a little bit on the economic question or some of the mineral interests. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that question of some of the sort of economic interests that may be driving this violence?
Well, I mean, the economic interests in Congo are huge. Congo's the biggest producer in the world of cobalt and coltan. These are strategic minerals for our economy. Congo produces about 70% of the global supply of cobalt, which is essential for batteries, for electric vehicles, and in military applications. Cobalt's mined industrially, whereas coltan is an artisanally mined mineral, and it's essential for our cell phones, our computers, in defense, space, and space applications. So aviation as well. So the world economy in many ways starts in Congo, and right now the global markets are getting these minerals for cheap, especially tantalum, which is a derivative of coltan. And so what is particularly worth understanding or being reminded of is that tantalum or coltan is mined, is mostly exported by Rwanda, and Rwandan mafias and its networks and proxies have seized control of the eastern ground zero for coltan production, which is a place called Rubaya. And, they've been in control of Rubaya since about April of last year, maybe a little bit after April, but it's been several months. And so, Rwanda seems to be has gotten away with a lot of crimes, but it's also a world hub for 3T. So 3T is these are artisanal minerals: tantalum, tin, and tungsten. And these are valuable minerals that are critical for the world economy. And I should say as well that China buys a lot of minerals from Rwanda. I mean, of course, the world economy could be buying directly and should be buying directly artisanal minerals from Congo, but it's not doing that. It's buying, knowing full well that Rwanda is sending its proxies into Congo and its own forces, is trafficking these minerals. And the big tech knows that this is going on, but major suppliers for big tech, refiners, etc., are buying directly from Rwanda. So they're enabling these crimes. As far as Canadian companies per se, I mean, I know Ivanhoe is a company, a Vancouver-based company. It's invested in a big copper project. And Ivanhoe was accused of violating rights of Congolese in recent years by evicting many Congolese in order to expand mining operations in Katanga. But most of these, human rights violations and multinationals enabling this are, all around the world. So I've written in my book, In Praise of Blood, that you mentioned how Canadian companies very early on in the 1990s, at the start of this, when Kagame ousted Mobutu and plunged Congo into decades of war, Canadian companies or Canadian listed companies, American Mineral Fields, which was founded in Canada but based in Arkansas, and Tenke Mining, whose that's a Canadian company, whose big investors were the Swedish Canadian group Lundin. They bankrolled Laurent Kabila's rebel group in 1996, 97. And of course, the AFDL, Laurent Kabila's group, was a front for Kagame when he unseated Mobutu in 1997. So we do have a role in what I feel is the very beginning of these crimes, this decades of violence that has overwhelmed the country and that has ultimately killed millions of people.
Yeah, there's all kinds of sort of bizarre. Banro is another Canadian company that's been kind of involved in sketchy dealings in the east of Congo, tied into
Mhm.
war fighting. But there's also all kinds of bizarre things like the sort of short-lived Canadian peacekeeping mission in '96 to what effectively provided a cover for what made it so the French didn't lead the mission, so so that enabled Kagame's intervention and stuff like that. So Canada's had this role also, and as you've pointed out, going back to in terms of supporting Kagame, or Romeo Daire's role and others in all the violence that swept up Rwanda in the years previous. But now more up to date to today, it's still this situation where, this isn't just like a history. This is literally like the Canadian government put out a statement on Sunday about the violence in Eastern Congo, and they don't even mention, they refer to, I think, foreign troops in some vague sense. They don't even mention Rwanda's intervention. Can you talk about a little bit about Trudeau's ties to Kagame and sort of the ties between Canada and sort of support for Kagame amidst all of this this recent violence and maybe the history as well?
Well, I mean, it's outrageous. The statement that was issued on Sunday that you referred to, um, radio silence on the principal, Canada's radio silence on the principal instigator of the violence, and over of the people who are overtaking Goma and responsible for displacing, which is Kagame, and his troops. It's the Rwanda, and unfortunately, as you mentioned, the reemergence of this rebellion and invasion, which started 3 years ago, in late 2000, 2021, 6 months after that rebellion was unleashed, the Canadian government under Trudeau decided to open up an embassy in Kigali and reaffirm and reestablish better relations with Rwanda. So strengthen ties um, with the idea that it needed to, doesn't matter whether or not these are African dictatorships that oppress African people. The foreign minister at the time, Melanie Joly, clearly stated that Canada had to fight against Chinese and Russian influence on the African continent. So there's absolutely no regard for human rights in Canadian foreign policy here. I mean, it's so absurd. It's very offensive to the Congolese. It was an affront at the time when Joly announced this. I mean, we've talked about Romeo Dallaire before. Romeo Dallaire, who headed in 1994 during the Rwandan genocide the UN peacekeeping mission in Kigali. He was a Canadian general. He has set up through the Dallaire Institute a program ostensibly to set up to combat the use of child soldiers in Africa. He's established the main African training center in Kigali, something called the African Center of Excellence for Children, Peace, and Security. More obfuscation. This institute now provides millions of dollars from the Canadian government to an army, to the Rwandan army, that is systematically violating international law. So millions of Canadian dollars are funding an army that's killing, raping Congolese civilians and forcibly recruiting child soldiers for combat in Congo. So this is enabling crimes at its worst. I would say that's, if we want to be brief, that's our Canadian foreign policy at the moment, which is complicit. So I would say Canada's complicit in this humanitarian mess.
And what you referred to at Roman Dallaire Institute, that was so egregious that even Global Affairs Canada employees basically were very uncomfortable about it. But it was sort of superseded at some higher up political level to continue the $20 million in funding to that project. Thanks a lot for talking to us about what's going on in Eastern Congo and some of Canada's role. Again, Judy Rever is the author of In Praise of Blood, The Crimes of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, that came out in 2018. People looking to understand a bit of what's going on there today would do well to pick up that book. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.